At one time I had a nickname, which was the steamroller. I heard that later from somebody, and although it's slightly embarrassing, I think, at the time, I look back on it with a certain amount of pride because it's what it took to make something happen. But I think the difficulty for me in business was not getting the job done, but was people. I always used to say, it was a silly glib thing to say, but I always used to say, um, business is easy. It's people that are difficult. So that's an introduction to where I started.
It's a really interesting and good take. And as I was listening to you, I was thinking about how many people do actually, have a vision of something that they like and have no experience whatsoever, but they're driven. And that's what I heard you say. You were driven and you were certain, on some level, certain you could make things work. And I think that if I really dig into what I've heard you say, there was something about being good at, maybe you did get the nickname of the steamroller, and maybe that served you in some ways when you look back, being good at dealing with resistance. That's what
Yeah.
I would dig deep and say. And maybe you could speak a little bit to that, and maybe the brash way you might have done it back then earned you a nickname, and how you might have modified that.
Well, Maria, life is difficult. I think is one of and business and everything is difficult, is one of the great realizations of great secrets of life is when you truly realize that life isn't easy and that you're not entitled to anything at all. um, then you can start to put things together. You can start to go out and do what you need to do to make things happen. Um, Say again, where were we going with this? I was for a moment I was taken away into remembering that young boy. So remind me where we were going.
Oh yeah, well, I mean it's a great thing to look back on because all of those experiences brought you to where you are. But I think what I was talking about was that you seem to be very good at dealing with resistance.
Resistance, yeah. Yeah, bombastic, you could say. I mean, um, it's got two sides to it. One is the driven thing I was talking about. That um, I I I think having no real education, I never had the imagination educated out of me. So I was always able to have a vision, whether it be what would the lighting company be like, or later when I was designing stages, what would that be like, or television rights, how would I sell those, or in Sushi, what would it look like? So I always had a sort of vision of something, and I could imagine what it would be. And my job, I felt, was to get from here to there along the way and make as few mistakes as it's possible to make to get there. But I guess along the way, um, what you've got all things conflict up on your behind you, and there were lots and lots of conflicts to get there. But I think if you can imagine what something is or what you want to get to, you've got a chance of getting there. If you can't imagine it, you've got absolutely no chance of getting there. So I suppose that was the driven part of it. And then, as I expect we're going to talk about, what were the relationships that you have to maintain in order to, I mean, for example, I used to come into the office, on a Monday morning, for example, and people would say, "How was your weekend?" And I was going to say, I used to think to myself, I think I probably said it to them, I'd say, well, what's that got to do with anything? It was almost as if we're in a war here, life, business, everything. Well, let's just focus on where we want to get to. And it took me a long time to learn that there's a certain, in Japan, they have a thing that they call nemawashi, which is a rather good word, I always think, because it's the ability to create rapport with other people. And if you go to a meeting in Japan, in America, you go to a meeting and they sit down. The first thing they say is okay, what's the deal? What's the deal, Simon? What are we going to do here? But in Japan, there's, the first in a 1 hour meeting, the first 30 or 40 minutes is how's the family, what's going on, and it's creating rapport. And it took me a long time to learn how to do that. And actually, I do that now all the time, and I'll go to a meeting and I won't talk about what we're going to do at all. And another one is with people like yourself, in your role as a journalist now, to make friends with journalists and to be interested in what they're doing, as well as them being interested in what I'm doing, and to create that nemawashi, that rapport. And once you can do that, then it's amazing how you can get things done. I mean, the great leaders I've met are all, for the most part, they're all sorts of difficult. There's nice people and nasty people and aggressive people and very quiet, gentle people, all of who've been successful in business. So whatever your character, you can be successful in all of those different areas. Um, so I don't know where I was going with that, but it's that was what took me a long time to learn, is that whole part of leadership. You know, yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah. So what I'm getting from listening to you is, there is a time to drive forward and there's a time to connect with people. So when I hear you say that, what comes up for me is running things on the basis of goodwill. So build the goodwill, build the bank of goodwill, so that in the moments when you feel very strongly about something, or you really want people to listen, or there's some tough challenge to face, you're starting from a place of having built that goodwill. You haven't got to scramble to get it. Does that resonate for you?
Yeah, no, I think the bank, I've never heard that expression put quite that way, but I think the bank of goodwill is a very good way to put it. I mean, it's simple for me, and it's taken me a long time to learn that. But I like working with nice people. Nice is a very, very broad word, but with people I can trust. I like people working with people who, one of the words I use, well, the two things I like is enthusiasm and people who over deliver. And so therefore I have to do the same thing to my people, is be enthusiastic about what they're doing and to over deliver. I mean, over deliver is the word I always use, especially to young people starting out. People go, "Oh, well, I'm not sure if he's giving me enough, or, what am I going to do?" And whatever you do, over deliver. Even if somebody does either rip you off in inverted commas, or not pay you what you're worth, or all of that. So just carry on over delivering. And they're amazing, those people. I actually call them desert island people, because if you were on a desert island, those are the sort of people you'd want to have around. People who've got that very good manner, not only to over deliver in terms of what they produce, but to are easy to be around, and I don't think I was easy to be around. I think I'm a lot easier to be around now, and people like me. I remember being at the Albert Hall. Actually, I did a speech at the Albert Hall for the Institute of Directors, and the outgoing Institute of what they call him, the Director General of the Institute of Directors, did a speech, and he said that when I was a young man coming into, I think this is relevant, yeah. When I was a young man coming into business, I thought that if I could prepare a really good business plan, and I had, um, you know, stringent, well put together argument for what I wanted to do and achieve, and it was logical, that I'd be able to persuade people to follow me. And he said, as I go out at the age of my late 70s, early 80s, he said, as I go out, I've realized that if I can touch people emotionally, it's a much better way to um, persuade and engage than to argue with them rationally. And when I do speeches, for example, I've realized that, I say to people, if you're going to do public speaking, just know that mostly, and same with on a podcast, most of the listeners today, they won't remember, you know, 90% of what I've said, or indeed what you've said, but they'll remember the atmosphere and the feeling of that person. And of course, as you're listening to something, whether it's in a conversation or on a podcast or in a speech, you're thinking, how is this relevant to me? And how can I use this? And how can I adapt it in my own life? And that's what's going on. I don't know if that's relevant, but it feels right to emotionally connect with people. And then by the same token, there's that expression which is, "Oh, this is different. This is business." And I don't think it is. I don't think business is any different at all. I think the same sort of rules and manners and all of that stuff, um, apply in your business relations as well as in your personal life. And I try to treat people as I would be treated myself. Um, you know, the difficult period that we're in history at the moment to live, especially in the West. Um, I lived for a great deal of my life. I lived out in Asia, and in Thailand, for example, I'm talking about kids now. In Thailand, for example, in the schools, they don't have cleaners at all. No cleaners, no janitors, and the children clean the school every morning for half an hour after the playground before school. They clean the school. They learn to work as a team, and of course, they learn manners. They learn the very thing. In Japan, they don't test kids until they're 10. They have the same thing. They clean up and do it, and is we have a workforce that, for the most part, comes from, I would say, in this period, this last period of 30 or 40 years, an awful lot of fairly dysfunctional families, and I'm not talking just at the bottom end, I'm talking all the way through. We don't have a culture that is either very polite like the Japanese and well-mannered and respectful to older people. We don't have a culture like the Thais, for example, a very good example of people who have a very kind and generous and smiling and wanting to help each other. And that goes very deep. And when you have that, that's why if you go on Asian aeroplanes, the service is so good because they come from a culture, and they say that in the hospitality business, in the hotel business. I say sometimes I say in Asia, well, how come you get um, such good service in this hotel? And I genuinely want to find out. And they say, really? I say, is the training that good? They say, we're not bad, but really it's because it comes from the right culture. So to really change that, we have to go into schools and teach things differently. So the change in that respect will come over a 10, 20, 30-year period, not what one political party puts into practice over a 4-year period. So what you're talking about, I think, is how we conduct ourselves is a long program, and what I admire about you, actually, and I've been thinking a lot about recently, is in any area. For example, I'm doing a speech for some therapists coming up, and I was wondering what to talk to them about. And I think really what I'm going to say is, which one of you is going to stand up and put your head above the parapet and be the person who brings what you know and what you do into a much bigger public world, whether that be by podcast, whether it be on an app, whether it be in schools. And that is exactly what you're doing with this, is to put your head above the parapet. And hopefully, in the old days, you used to be able to, you wrote a book. And in fact, I happen to have, only coincidentally, that is the book of Yo Man is my new autobiography. But you write a book, or you do whatever, or we do what you're doing. And to put your head above the parapet, get noticed, and influence large numbers of people. That's the idea.
There's so much that you've shared with us there, and I want to try and pick out some of what I felt was really important. No, that's really just, I could listen to you all day. So, so there was something about this, the times we're in and the generations now, and how I describe it is actually, and you're comparing that to other cultures that are about giving service and gratitude, which we seem to have lost. And the way I speak about that is I say that what we have actually generated is the perfect product of consumerism and competition and the individual agenda. And that's what we're looking at. And when will we, as the adults, understand that we created this? This is the fruit of our labours.
But just say that again.
So that
Three things.
yeah, that we have created the perfect product that comes from consumerism and competition and the individual agenda.
Yeah. That's very good.
And so when you say it takes
Perfect
years,
storm.
perfect storm, and this is going to take years to undo.